there is a drawback to that a certain percentage of the population is cut off from that.
Yeah.
So we work with the National Orientation Agency, who is a key stakeholder in the open government partnership process, who has offices across the country in the different local government areas.
Okay.
And then we use their framework to disseminate this information. They collate it, send it back to the secretariat. Usually there is a committee that now looks through everything that citizens have brought, because one NAP will not solve all
the
our
problems.
problems.
Yeah, I get that.
So we now need to prioritize, but even in the prioritizing, the citizens have done part of the work. So what is important to the citizens, it's like a vote. So you determine, okay, these are the things. So for instance, in the third National Action Plan, citizens determined that climate change was a key area that required attention. At the time, climate change and environment was not yet a globally accepted, commonly accepted thematic area in open governance, because you're thinking climate change and governance. But the citizens realized that when we talk about climate change, that people need to have public information. It needs to be there. When we also talk about climate change, there's quite a bit of financing that goes into these activities, and we need to know what is going where, who is getting it, and what they're doing with it. And so Nigeria was actually one of the first pioneering countries that championed climate change and environmental commitments in the Open Government Partnership Alliance.
Really?
And this is over 70 countries globally. Yes,
well,
because it was a priority for citizens.
For the citizens. Well, I like the background that you've given, and your very honest submission when it comes to citizenship participation, right? And little wonder you've also taken it, a notch higher to go through the National Orientation Agency to see that more citizenry are being imputed in the process. But one of the things that Nigerians, and by Nigerians I mean the family members listening to us right now, would want to know is, we've seen action plans come and go. You said this is the third, this is just, we're planning, looking forward to the fourth, National Action Plan, NAP. The place of transparency, the place of accountability has always been the bane of it. So if you find that the citizens are not very receptive, so to speak, right? Initially, it is because of all of these factors. So how are we looking to ensure that in the implementation of the fourth NAP, that citizenship will experience the joy of transparency, because I call it the joy now, and accountability in the process?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So first, let me mention that the Open Government Partnership Initiative is not a standalone.
Oh, okay.
So you don't implement OGP commitments in a vacuum. The OGP commitments provide, or the Open Government Partnership framework, it provides a framework to institutionalize all of government reforms around transparency, accountability, around citizens' participation.
Right.
So in terms of the NAP implementation, the NAP commitments actually, like I mentioned, speak to the priorities of citizens, as well as government's priorities, because it's co-created. It's no one side, coming up with the idea.
So you come to build a bridge, of trust.
Yes.
Togetherness.
Yes. In fact, a former co-chair of ours, the former Minister for Budget and National Planning, would call it a marriage.
Oh yeah, a union.
Between civil society
a union.
And the government.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of the NAP implementation, these commitments and the activities under the commitments would usually speak to the mandate of MDAs.
Oh, okay.
And then citizens supporting them. So we're not going to create a totally different mandate and say that National Orientation Agency should start building bridges, for instance. We realize that there is need for citizens to be engaged, for citizens to participate in the process. So which government agency already funded by taxpayers' money has that mandate? And we talk to NOA, we talk to the Ministry of Information, and they know how to pass that information.
Great.
Of course, we can talk to the media, private media organizations,
Right.
but that requires funding.
Sure.
Except you're providing in-kind support.
It requires funding. I like that part.
In-kind support at all times. Yes.
Right.
But it's important,
Yeah.
though, that even though I've mentioned that this implementation goes on by different MDAs,
Mm-hmm.
there is also the place for citizens and citizens groups. So there are also commitments or activities, mostly activities actually, where citizens or civil society organizations play a key role in driving. So, for instance, when we talk about advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
If we want to, make a change in
Yeah.
the government,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that government will be pushing that change, right?
True.
Advocacy has to come from the outside, and so the civil society organizations will work to do that. But in terms of how, as citizens, the man and the woman on the street can make sure that this is transparent, that it is accountable, how can you ensure that the implementation is accountable? I will suggest, and very strongly too, that we make use of a tool that has been provided for us as Nigerians. It's called the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay.
It was enacted in 2011.
Yeah.
Use that act. It is open to everybody. You
Okay.
don't need to be an organization. You don't need to be registered. You don't need to have a phone number. Anybody.
So the market woman on the street,
Yes.
can just go and say, you know what, I need this information.
Yes. So
Right.
two things. You can either make a formal request that is written.
Yeah.
If you're literate, the act allows for you to go to that agency and say, I want to make an FOI request. And an officer should come and reduce it, for you in writing.
Mm-hmm.
They read it to you. Is it okay? You thumb print if you cannot sign. The act allows for that.
So there's fluidity in that
Yes.
process. Okay.
Yes. So
Awesome.
it's important that we engage that process. It exists. It's already there. There is, some information is being supplied, but if there is something that you need, that you think that is not proactively disclosed, make the request, ask for it. Now, you will encounter challenges in some places. That's a given.
Okay.
But there is support from civil society organizations. There is support from the Ministry of Justice's
Yeah.
Freedom of Information Unit. They would support you if you don't get the response you need. Bear in mind, of course, that not all public information is accessible to
Well,
the public.
exactly. That's
there
true.
are exemptions
True.
in the law.
True.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into capacity building, right? Initiatives. Are there any capacity building initiatives that can be employed or deployed in ensuring that we strengthen citizenship engagement in NAP implementation? And of course, is there also a term as policy coherence, right, across the different sectors and levels of government in NAP implementation? Maybe we'll just wrap those into one. Okay, now she laughs. She laughs. This is the tall one.
That's
But I
definitely
know.
a tall one.
Let's see how we can just quickly, put it all together.
Okay. So in terms of capacity building for
Yeah.
citizens, civil society organizations are always on a regular basis funding workshops,
Okay.
Citizens assemblies,
Okay.
Town halls.
Oh,
there
town
are-
halls too?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
And it would depend on the sector, on the issue, but there's always something or the other. So as a Nigerian on the street there, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. It's a lot of times it's open to join. But there is also a lot of use of technology. So there are digital platforms that allow you to participate as a citizen, that also train you. There is the OGP Niger app. Yes.
OGP Niger app. Oh, awesome.
Yes. It's on Play Store.
Okay.
And then you can get information on the NAP. You can see what the commitments, what the activities are. But other than even just specifically drawing it down to the NAP, the government has a citizens delivery tracker.
Okay.
Where you can make some input. It gives information on government activities, programs, projects, policies. You can make some inputs there. There is the iMark, EYEMARK,
Yeah.
the iMark app. You can, but I think that one speaks more to projects.
True. Most
So
mostly.
a lot of digital platforms exist. There is also use of media. For instance, this program
Right
is
now.
a capacity building forum
Awesome.
for citizens.
Awesome.
Telling them about what they can do, what it's about, and how they can make it work. There is also translating important materials to indigenous languages or to simplified versions. For instance, the Budget Office of the Federation translates the budget document into a citizen's budget.
For real.
You didn't know that?
No, I'm just putting it out there.
Alright.
Like for real.
Okay.
For real.
Okay. But even things like the budget is available online.
True. That part.
Organizations like Budget also simplify those. The FOI Act is translated into different languages. I know that the NOA has done some translation. Organizations such as CTA, Center for Transparency Advocacy, has done a simplified version. Ethics and Corporate Compliance, a few people have done simplified versions, different languages and all that. So it makes it easier to support. Now, in terms of policy coherence, back to the thing I said in the beginning, it's not in a vacuum.
Okay.
It's co-created, between government and civil society. In co-creating the National Action Plan, other than looking at what citizens have raised, the concerns that citizens have raised, we also look at the National Development Plan. We look at the SDGs. We look at previous SNAPs, see what has not been implemented, what are the low-hanging fruits, what are the results that we have, where do we need to strengthen, things like that. But we also look at government's priority areas too.
You want to tell us about that? Priority areas?
Okay, so this administration, for instance, has 8 priority areas that speak to social welfare, so things like education, health, and all that. And if we want more information, we should ask them, not me.
Oh, okay, I get that.
Yes.
Okay, that part. Yeah, all right.
So when we bring all this together, and bearing in mind that these are also not created in vacuum, so the National Development Plan would be, developed with input from citizens and citizens groups. So at the end of the day, the priority areas will be similar.
Okay.
Now, in terms of policy coordination, again, in actual implementation of the NAPs and SAPs at state level, you have focal officers from the MDAs that are implementing, who work very closely with civil society organizations who are, working in that area.
Okay.
So in terms of extractives, you'll be speaking to maybe an AT, an NU, PRC, NNPC, and then the civil society organizations who play in that area. So they'll be working together to make sure that things, that the commitments are properly implemented.
Yeah.
But this current administration has also set up a central results coordination and delivery unit, which will work very closely with, the OGP Secretariat, and OGP implementation works quite closely with that unit. So what that means is that unit's responsibility now is to make sure that policy is properly coordinated, that we don't have cases, for instance, what we've had in the past, where 2 different agencies have similar mandates, and they come to the meeting and everybody like, it's my job, no, it's your job,
becomes
that
a
kind of
brawl.
thing. So things like that are, and that is the government side of the business.
Right.
As citizens, our job is to make sure that whatever it is that government has said they will do, that we hold them to account to make sure that they do it. Where whatever resources have been provided, that we use them efficiently, effectively.
So I'm gonna take a pause there. Have we indeed used the resources that have been provided, for these purposes, and are they really enough? That's it.
So
Maybe that's another bundle, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Quite
okay.
a bundle.
Yeah.
So resources, and in this regard, when I talk about resources, I talk of policy, I talk of laws, regulations
True.
to support,
Yes.
the
The
work
frontiers
that
of
civil
what this.
society does. So if these have been provided to whatever extent that it has been provided,
It
our
is used.
job as citizens
Yeah.
is to make sure that we use it. Now, when you use a law, when you're testing the law, you're utilizing the provisions of that law, that is when we can now determine if we need to amend the law
Or not.
We can now determine what the gaps are in the law. But if we don't use it, then
Okay. Well, okay.
our job is to use it, really.
Right. Well, look, have we also have we ever still seen the place of monitoring and evaluation play a vital role to improving the NAP implementation? That's on the one side. And of course, on the other side, how can we indeed make NAP implementation more inclusive, particularly for marginalized groups? Oh, are there no marginalized groups?
Well, of course, there are always marginalized groups in society.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Persons living with disabilities.
Exactly.
Young people.
Exactly.
Women.
True.
Aged people. You know, there's all sorts of vulnerabilities. Now, we of course speak to inclusion. We don't just speak it, we walk it. And so, in terms of OGP implementation, we work with the different agencies and citizens groups that support women. We've had the Ministry for Women Affairs on the National Steering Committee. We've had the Commission for Persons Living with Disabilities in technical working groups that speak to inclusion. We have Servicom that also speaks to social services.
I remember we had Servicom here to talk about,
okay, that's
exactly.
Fantastic, So we have all those things. But even at point of co-creation, so we have inclusion through planning, through implementation, and through the reviews. So when you speak to monitoring and evaluation, there is globally an independent reporting mechanism system that reviews the work that a country has done in the course of implementing their national action plan at midterm and at end term. There is the country's own self-assessment report. And civil society in the past have also carried out shadow assessment reports. So when you triangulate this, you can tell, the actual scope of what has been done and the degree to which it has been effective. And I know that the supporters of this project, SEDEC,
and the EU.
This year, funded by that EU, the OGP project,
exactly.
They had carried out an assessment of civil societies.
I was going to come there, and I'm just going to say, where are we at? Where exactly are we at? Are we fair? Are we good? Are we better? Are we excellent? That's the point.
So in some areas, we are excellent.
In some other areas, we're just fair.
So, for instance, in terms of beneficial ownership transparency, Nigeria is a leading, country in that. Beneficial ownership means that you provide information as to who the actual real owners of a corporate entity are, not just the people whose names are on paper, right? So who has control, who receives benefits up to, in Nigeria, I think it's 5%. So we have that. In terms of budget openness, we are not doing too badly. In fact, we've greatly improved. The budget documents are online now.
Accessible.
A few years ago, these were confidential documents.
Exactly.
Both at federal and at state level, they were highly confidential documents. But this is online now. We have the National Open Contracting Portal, NOCOPO, by the BPP that is available now. Citizens can and should use that. So you should look at the budget. You should look at what procurement is going on, and then you should be able to match. Look at your area. So if the budget says that there is a bridge that should be built in your community, and you look at the open contracting portal and you see that bridge has been awarded in your community, and you cannot see a bridge in your community, you should start to ask questions. So that is where the use of those resources, using those tools,
comes in.
You should start to ask, Mr. Local government chairman or our rep or senator or governor, where is my bridge?
We can't even find these people. What happens?
Why can't you find them?
I mean, you know why? Why am I saying this?
Now, you know their homes.
Okay, it's fine. I'll leave it there. Let's not even go further. I'll just ask one more or two more questions interwoven into one, and let's just call it a close. I mean, you've spoken extensively well, comprehensive wisdom in this regard, but how can successful NAP implementation be scaled up to achieve greater impact, as well as do you have a media or fora where there is citizenship feedback, and how is it helping you, especially when you look into other future NAP processions or meetings?
Citizens feedback is always very important. We're always very excited to receive feedback, because at the end of the day, whether you're on the government side or on the civil society side, you are a Nigerian.
Right.
So we the people of Nigeria here. So in terms of feedback, the Open Government Partnership Secretariat is open to receiving feedback.
Every day?
Yes, the Secretariat sits at the Ministry of Budgets and Economic Planning.
Okay.
That's the physical
Yes,
location
yes.
of that Secretariat. They have, there's a website, I mentioned there is the OGP app, OGP Niger app. They have social media handles. So you can write to the Secretariat, but most importantly,
Okay.
if we remember what I mentioned earlier, that the NAP is not created or implemented in a vacuum,
That's right.
that the different commitments and activities are implemented by different MDAs. So you can actually write to whichever agency or MDA who is carrying out that particular activity. You can give that feedback. And Servicom has a feedback
mechanism system.
Yes,
yeah?
they must have explained
Yes,
that.
they have. They have
And
explained
it is around health, education, infrastructure, so roads,